you.
All right, good afternoon. I'm just muting some people. All right, so I already hit record, so we're one step ahead here. This is class on SPRP and the COP. And for those of you who don't know, the SPRP is seller purchase of replacement property. So if you have a seller who needs to find a home of choice, it used to be called a home of choice, then you would need that form in order to protect your client. The other one is COP, contingency on buyer sale of property. I think that's what it will. When we look at it, we'll figure out what it exactly is. So let's just get into it here. Let's see. There we go. So what you should be seeing is the seller's purchase of replacement property, the SPRP, which actually was just revised in June. Obviously you guys know how to fill in who the buyers are, who the sellers are in the property, but I do want to point out that it depends on where this addendum comes in. Is it part of the purchase agreement? Is it in the purchase agreement at the start of it, or is it added as a counter? If it's added as a counter, you need to notate that. Most likely it will be added as a counter because the seller is going to add this, or the agent representing the seller. And please, listing agents, do not just say this is contingent on seller's home choice in a counter. Use this form. This form has multiple protections for the client. So if the seller needs to find a replacement property, use this form. Okay, so getting into the form, it is 1A. So the first contingency is finding a replacement property. This agreement is contingent on seller entering into a contract to acquire replacement property or identifying a suitable property to move to. So seller shall, within 17 days after acceptance, remove the finding replacement property contingency or cancel the agreement. If the seller does not remove the finding replacement property contingency in writing within that time, buyer can give a notice to perform, and after the 2 days, they can cancel. So that is the first contingency in regards to this form. It's finding or identifying. So, and it defaults to 17 days. Obviously, you can work with those days. The other thing, 1B, says they're already in escrow. So the seller has entered into a contract to find on their replacement property. Terry Lynn, yeah.
Rich, what is the maximum you'd recommend for the A1? Like the maximum date?
I mean, nobody's going to wait forever for somebody to find this replacement property. I wouldn't go, I mean, I probably wouldn't go more than 21 days.
Okay.
If the buyer would even agree to that. If I was the buyer, I wouldn't agree to it. I'd give them the 17 days and say you've got 17 days. And then 1C is adding another layer to this and saying it's also contingency on closing on that replacement property. It's not only identifying or getting into escrow, it's closing. Now, if you're representing the buyer, you're probably not going to want that, or the buyer's probably not going to want that. So it becomes a negotiation. Moving on to items number 2, and this is why it's really important to use these forms, because no matter what I lost my train of thought. Sorry. It's important to use these forms, because if you just add into an addendum seller defined home of choice, it doesn't deal with contingency time periods. It doesn't deal with deposits. So, Terry Lynn, yeah, you have another question? No.
Sorry, I was trying to lower my.
Okay. So it's not dealing with that. So this form deals with the time period. So this form defaults that the time periods in the agreement for inspections, contingencies, covenants, close of escrow, and all other obligations that commence from the date of acceptance shall begin the day after the seller delivers to buyer a written notice removing the contingency or for finding a replacement property. So that's what the default is. So if it takes them 15 days to find that replacement property and get into escrow, they remove that contingency on the 15th day, then the clock starts. So the next day after that contingency is removed is day 1, and everything moves forward. Now, there is an option to say that the time periods remain as they are specified in the agreement. But if you're a buyer, why would you want to do your inspections and all this stuff if you're not sure that the seller is really going to move forward on a sale because they can't find something else to move to? So I would leave this as the default, that all the time periods start on the day after they remove this contingency, and be that. Now, next on this list is buyer's deposit. So buyer's deposit, the default is, shall be delivered to escrow within 3 business days after seller delivers to buyer a written notice removing the finding replacement property contingency. I would not leave this as the default.
Yeah.
I would want this buyer to have some skin in the game here. You want them invested in this property. So I would check the box and say as specified in the agreement. But once again, this is all negotiations. Close of escrow. So 2C, parties agree that the seller may extend the close of escrow date for the sale of seller's property for a maximum. And here's where if you're giving them 17 days to get into escrow. Now, remember, all the time periods start at the day after they remove this. So that includes close of escrow. So you probably don't need to add that many additional days, maybe 7, 10. That's kind of just a pad. Because if it's a 30-day escrow and they have a 30-day escrow, you may want a pad of a week or so that maybe they they close first on that, and then they close on this one. So, or you can give a specific date. So that's all negotiated up front. So that's why it's really important to use this form, because there's no surprises. You've already accounted for contingencies. You've already accounted for the deposit. You've accounted for, if I need a little more time for the close of escrow, I'm going to get it because I've already negotiated that. So,
Hello.
yes. Hello? I'm trying to see who's not muted. Anyways, so other terms, I don't know what other terms. I wouldn't put seller remains in possession in here because you should use the SIP. I don't know what other terms could come up. But I'm sure there's some, but I can't think of any right now. Removal of the contingencies, even after, as usual, even after the expiration of the contingency, they have to be removed in writing. The buyer has a right to cancel after they give a notice to the form. It's the usual stuff, and the seller has a right to cancel if prior to removing this finding replacement property, then they can cancel because they haven't found the replacement property. And then 5B says that if seller is unable to close escrow, then they can cancel. So that's this form, the seller's purchase of replacement property. Anybody have any questions regarding this form?
Yes, Rich, it's Jasmine. Just to confirm, so 5B. So even if the seller has done all the other stuff, removed contingencies, but it ultimately is not able to close on that replacement property, they still have the right to cancel? Did I understand that correctly?
If they've checked 1C, yes, because you're making it a contingency that
yes,
it's
you
a
have
close, you have to close. And if you can't
Okay.
close, then yeah, they can cancel.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why a buyer wouldn't want that, because you can get to the end of it, and just because they can't close, they're going to cancel and you're stuck. So, any other questions about this one?
Yeah, Rich, one question here.
Sure.
Does the buyer have the right to ask for a copy of the new RPA so they know how long, what terms and all that stuff, or it's all in this
It's not,
form?
no, it's not dictated in here that they have to get a copy of it. But what is happening is that everything starts once they remove it. So once they remove it, then there is no more contingency on finding it. So everything proceeds from that day forward. So and that's why maybe you add, in the sellers, add a few extra days, because it's going to take a few extra days for them to close on that. So, but no, they don't have a right to see the contract. Any other questions?
Hi, Rich, it's Christine.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm in my car, so apologize if it's weird. This
No.
form, when did this form come out? I can't see the dates. Is this brand new?
Well, this was revised. No, it's not brand new. This was revised in June of this year. This form has been around for years. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question because remember that 3-part deal I had? I represented the third person on the poll there, the buyer from a seller, and the seller was buying the other property, and they were in.
Right.
So that was something, this form, the other form didn't seem like it obviously as thorough as this new form, but there was, they were pushing to us to remove all contingencies as the third, the buyer. And I said, not until you remove all that. So we waited, and they granted us, but we had to write an addendum. Do you understand what I'm saying about that? The buyer was already supposed to remove all the contingency, and the seller's agent was pressuring us to. And I said, we're not removing all contingencies because they haven't removed their seller, the replacement property one. So we
Right,
got to wait
okay,
until
so-
they did it.
well,
Does this form now
But
incorporate
here's
that?
here's the thing, Christine, if this form was in place, then the buyer's contingencies don't start until this contingency is removed.
Yeah, except that agent countered that out. I remember this. Okay. Yeah,
Well,
they
yeah,
countered it
so-
out that they didn't want it to start, and that was what the problem was. So,
Okay,
okay, but
well,
this does incorporate that. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
okay, all right. Any other questions? Not seeing any. I'm gonna move to. I've been having problems with this new form editor thing, so I'm using the old one. Wait, where is it? No, you're in the way. Okay, so the COP, contingency for sale of buyer's property. I have to move things around, sorry. Contingency for sale of buyer's property. Once again, this is if a buyer has to sell his property in order to buy the new one. So once again, you should be able to fill out all of that. And if it's an addendum to a purchase agreement, or if it's it wouldn't be an addendum to, it would be just an addendum to a purchase agreement, really, because if you're writing the offer for your buyer, so you would make this a contingency from the start. So once again, use this form because it has a whole bunch of things on it that that protects your buyer. So the first thing we get to is this is a buyer's property contingency. The agreement is contingent upon the buyer entering into a contract for the sale of and closing escrow on the buyer's property, paragraphs 2 and 4. So it could either only be a contingency for only entering into a contract if you check B. So let me straighten this, not straighten this out. Let me clarify this. 1A is the default, and 1A states that it's entering into a contract and closing escrow. So if you check no other boxes, then it is for entering and closing. Now you can make it only entering into the contract by checking B, or you can make it only entering into only closing escrow because you're already in escrow and you give the information about the escrow there. So a copy of, and this is where a copy of the contract for sale of buyer's property and the contact information and escrow number for that sale is attached to the COP form or will be delivered within 2 days. So this is an instance, which is interesting because why do you make the buyer show proof, but you don't make the seller? But I don't write these contracts. So once again, default is entering into a contract and closing. But if you check B, it's only entering into the contract. Or if you check C, it's only closing because you're already in escrow. Any questions about that before I move on? Because that's the whole basis of this thing. So. Okay, so Now we're going to talk about entering into the contract. So the buyer has 17 days after acceptance to enter into a contract for the sale of buyer's property. That's B. Now you can change that number, whatever. Once again, same thing, Terry Lynn. The seller's not going to wait around forever. So, if you can get away with more days, all the power to you. But I don't really think that a seller would do that. And then B, by the earlier of time specified in 2A, within 2 days after buyer entering into contract for the sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver escrow evidence to seller and escrow holder. By the earlier of time specified in 2A or within 2 days. So within that 17 days, it's a weird way to write it, I know. So within that 17 days, or within 2 days after buyer entering into contract, they'll deliver escrow evidence. Okay, so that's item number 2. Listing and MLS status of the buyer's property. Buyer has signed a listing agreement for the buyer's property, or if you check the box, within 3 days after acceptance, sign a listing agreement, and it better be with your brokerage. Why should somebody else get the listing? So they either have to be or already have to have a listing agreement or be signing a listing agreement within 3 days after acceptance. And then 3B, buyer's property is or will be submitted to the MLS in the geographical area where buyer's property is located, or check the box, buyer will not be submitted to the MLS. Meaning it will be an off-market, it will be an exclusive listing only marketed within the brokerage's office. Now, let me say something here is, if you're a listing agent, why would you ever agree to this if they're not going to put it on the MLS? Doesn't really give the widest variety of buyers, widest pool, and why would a seller accept that? I wouldn't. Buyer shall deliver to seller evidence of both the listing agreement within 1 day after acceptance. If buyer's property is already listed, if not already listed, within 1 day after listing. So that's item or section number 3. Any questions on that? Okay. Close of escrow of buyer's property. Buyer has until the following time to close escrow on the sale of buyer's property. The scheduled close of escrow of seller's property, meaning that they're closing concurrently, or if checked, no later than 5 days prior to the scheduled close of escrow, buyer can no longer use the contingency to cancel the the agreement. So what that's saying is that, okay, we're going to close concurrently, or if you check that box, we're going to close 5 days prior. But the caveat to closing before is, okay, we say that you're going to close 5 days prior, but something happens and you can't close escrow. Well, you no longer can use this contingency to get out of it because you said you were going to close prior to close of escrow. I don't really know what the reasoning on that is totally, but that's something to be aware of. If you're going to say you're going to close before the one you're buying, then if you can't close, if something happens, up to that 5 days, then once that 5 days hit, then you can't cancel the deal because you can't cancel escrow on that side. So be careful about that. Okay, Chair Lynn.
So what do you do, Rich? What's the best thing to do to protect the buyer if you're not for sure? You know what I mean? If for something happening.
Close concurrently. Because if you close concurrently, if you're saying you're going to close at the same time the other one closes, well, you have until you actually close to cancel. So if at the last minute you can't close, buyer can back out because they can't close.
Okay,
They're
perfect.
on their property. Any other questions on that section? Okay. Status of sale of buyer's property, 1A and C. So, okay. Buyer agrees to keep seller informed about the status of the transaction for the sale of the buyer's property, including any changes, modifications, addendums in terms of the accepted offer, delays to or removal of contingencies. So you have to keep the seller side informed of what's going on. You just have to. Okay, we've removed this contingency. We got past the inspection contingency. We got past the appraisal. And then 5B, within 2 days after the seller's written request, but no earlier than the applicable time to remove the contingencies in the contract of the sale. Wait, I lost my place. Within 2 days after the seller's written request, but no earlier than the applicable time to remove contingencies in the contract for sale of buyer's property, buyer shall deliver to seller evidence of removal of those identified contingencies. So the seller's agent and the seller has a copy of this contract. So they know the timeline that for the, on that side. So a good listing agent on this transaction is going to say, oh, you had 10 days for inspection. How did your inspection go? Did you remove that contingency? Did you get it? Did you get, what you wanted? That listing agent is going to be on the buyer's agent saying, okay, you should have removed appraisal. Did you have an appraisal? If you got a really hard-nosed listing agent, that's going to be a nightmare transaction. I'm just saying. But anyways, that's pretty self-explanatory. So cancellation of buyer's property. If buyer's property is in or enters escrow and either party in that escrow gives the other a notice of cancellation, buyer within 2 days thereafter shall deliver to seller written notice of that cancellation. So, it used to be that everybody would kind of play this game. Oh, I jumped out of escrow on this one, but I'm quickly going to find something else to get into escrow with. And so I can keep this purchase going. But you have to tell them that if that canceled, you have to tell them that it canceled. Because if that canceled, then the seller can give a notice to perform to remove that contingency, because that contingency was only good for that one, fine. It's like they're not going to wait around another 10 days till you find a new property. So you unfortunately have to keep them abreast. If it canceled, you have to let them know. Any questions about that? Okay. So backup offer, okay, this, I get the most questions about this section, section 7. Backup offers and seller right to require buyer to remove contingencies or cancel. So 7A talks about after acceptance, seller shall have the right to continue to offer seller's property for sale for backup offers. The party acknowledges that brokers shall not violate MLS rules requiring accurate property status. What does that mean? What that means is you've got a contract that's contingent on the sale of the buyer's property. Just because it's contingent on that sale, you have a contract. So you can't leave it active in order to get more offers. Give the impression that it's still available, because it really isn't available. It's available for backup offers, and but it's not available for somebody to accept an offer right then and there. So MLS rules within 2 days, no longer business days. CRMLS is 2 days. You have to change the status when the status changes on a listing. So that's 7A. You've got to, you can take backup offers. Yes. 7B, removal of buyer contingencies and proof of funds. Unless paragraph 7C, and we'll get to paragraph 7C, is selected, if buyer accepts a written backup offer and provides buyer a copy of the signed accepted backup offer within the time specified in 7C1 or 2, seller shall have the right to give written notice to buyer in writing to remove this contingency, remove the loan contingency, if any, and provide verification of sufficient funds to close escrow without the sale of buyer's property. Seller may use the bottom of page 2 of this form to comply with the written notice requirement of the paragraph. If buyer fails to complete the actions within 2 days after delivery of such notice, seller may immediately cancel this agreement in writing. That's a big paragraph. Okay. So what this is saying, and there's 7C kind of delays this, but if 7C isn't checked, then what this is saying is, Mr. Buyer, if I get a backup offer within these 17 days or whatever days you put, put in the time frame, if I get a backup offer and I show you a backup offer that may be a better offer than yours, and I tell you, you need to remove this contingency, show me proof that you can move forward on this purchase without the sale of your property, or else step aside because you're out. That's what this says, and that's what this does. So now for the buyer's protection, let's go over what we're talking about in 7C, which is time to give notice to remove contingencies. So the seller shall have the right to invoke the notice provisions in 7B, meaning you're out, somebody else is in. It defaults to immediately right to not notify buyer anytime after acceptance. We don't want that as a buyer's agent. Okay. So the best you're probably going to get is 7C2. Delayed right to notify buyer. No earlier than 17 days after acceptance, or whatever. I usually tell agents to match whatever days you're asking for to get into escrow, get to match those days on the delayed right to notify buyer. So if it's 17 days, then leave this as 17 days. And what that does is the seller can't kick you out. The seller has to give you those 17 days. So, so obviously every buyer's agent is going to, want some protection, because your buyer has to sell their property in order to buy this. If they had the money to buy it outright, they probably would. Or maybe there are some that could buy it outright, but they just don't want to. But that's what this is for. Now, 7C3 is saying that the seller has no right during any portion of the transaction, and no listing agent is going to agree to that. I doubt it. And not in this market. I mean, this market is still a hot market. People, things are selling low, inventory is low. It's not going to happen. Maybe in a different market, yes, but not this market. Okay. So, so that's this section 7 about accepting backup offers. Before I move on, any questions about this? No, hearing it. Okay. Removal of contingencies. Contingency can only, this is, contract 101. They only can be removed in writing. And the seller has a right to cancel after giving notice. We went over the fact that the delayed notice, if there's no delayed notice, then the seller at any time can say, adios, you're out of here, and I'm moving you out. Otherwise, if the 17 or whatever number of days or 2 days prior to when that is coming up, you can give a notice to perform. And the buyer's right to cancel is if they can't get into escrow on something, and if they haven't limited it to just getting into escrow, if they can't close, then they can get out. Now, this is section 11 is what 7B was talking about giving notice, time for performance of contract obligations and delivery of buyers. Oh, no, never mind. That's not what, it's not what this is about. This is about deposit. So contract obligations, time periods in the agreement for inspections, contingencies, and everything else, all of that stuff. It's what's in the agreement. So day 1 after acceptance, that's when timeframes start. Or you can check the box. It's the day after you enter into escrow. So, so once again, it's either this contract is a little switched, whereas everything in the seller side, everything started the day after they found their property. This is everything starts per the contract and the day after acceptance, unless you check the box. Sorry. Buyer's deposit. Buyer's deposit. Once again, it's per the agreement, or if you check the box 3 days after you get into escrow. Sorry. This is the section that I was talking about the notice to remove buyer contingencies and provide proof of funds. So if there's no stipulation or there's no delay, the seller can use this form. It's basically acting as a notice to perform. It's saying, show me what you got. And if you don't, then I can cancel immediately. So that's what that's what this 7B was referring to, this section. So all the seller has to do is sign this section. You deliver it to the buyer's agent if you have a right to do it. And they either need to remove the contingencies or step aside and move on. Okay, so that's this form. Any questions on the contingency, the COP, contingency for sale of buyer's property? Anybody? Not seeing any. No? No? Bueller? While I have you, I'm gonna stick something in here because I keep getting them wrong. They're being sent to me not filled out correctly. Cancellation of listing. Okay. What I get a lot is that, yeah, the principal is signed and there's a place for me to sign, and then nothing is filled out. Nothing is filled out here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing is filled out. And that's wrong. So if you want to cancel a listing, first off, only the broker can cancel the listing. For those of you agents who are, oh, it's been on the market, my seller wants it to show up as a fresh new listing. And so let's cancel this listing and put it back on the MLS. Well, the MLS is cracking down on stuff like that, because it used to be that you just cancel, put it back, cancel, put it back, cancel, put it back. They want to see the cancellation. They want to see the new listing. And even the MLS wants to see this stuff. I get more notices from the MLS than I get from CRMLS. And the MLS is the more lenient of the MLS. They do things really loosey-goosey. So anyways, so if you're playing that game, which I don't like that game, but my seller wants it, then you have to cancel one and write another, but fill it out correctly. So 1B, section 1B. So what this says, that if prior to the end of the listing period specified in the listing or any extension, principal enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property. I forgot to read the first part, which is principal agrees to pay broker the amount of compensation specified in the agreement. And then if you check A, if prior to the end of the listing specified, they enter into a contract to sell. What this says, and you better, if you're going to do that, which great, do it. Because what that says is that if prior to the expected expiration of the listing contract that I gave you, remember, a listing contract, the very first line is it's an irrevocable agreement, which means it can't be canceled without mutual agreement. Can't just be canceled. I have to agree to it. The listing belongs to the brokerage. That's why I'm always asking, why are we canceling this? Because I want to know. I'm nosy. So it has to be mutually agreed upon. But this 1A, if you check that, that means if I have a listing till the end of the year, and I'm letting you out of this listing now, if you take this listing to somebody else, which you have every right to do because it's canceled, if you take it to somebody else, then I still get my commission, even though you owe them a commission probably with the agreement that you signed with them. you still owe me my commission. So you need to make sure, if you're going to use this, that they realize that. Because you need to inform them of that. So 1B says that if you check 1B, that if X calendar days after the cancellation, so if X calendar days after the cancellation, you sell this to somebody I exposed this property to. So if they wrote an offer, if they physically entered, if they were shown by another brokerage, but guess what? You need to list these people. That's what this is for, these 2 lines. You need to list those people that wrote an offer, that entered, that, all these people, because if within 180 days, 30 days, 90 days, whatever that is, whatever that time period is, if they end up buying it, I'm still owed the commission. So, but it's only if you write the names down. A lot of people will check that box, put 180 days or number of days, and then leave it blank. It's useless because you haven't told them who they can't sell it to, and I get the commission. So that's 1B. In the event of a transaction specified in A or B, broker has no obligation. Guess what? I don't have to represent you. I just want the money. That's what C says. And then compensation is payable on close of escrow if completion of the transaction is prevented by default of the seller or the seller on seller's default. So so if they get into escrow with these people and they default on it, the seller defaults, or they make it unable to close, you're still owed the commission. I'm not saying this is an easy fight. It's not an easy fight, to try to go after somebody for commission. But so that's section 1. Okay. Section 2, a principal agrees to pay broker a percentage if of the sales price, if prior to the end of the listing period or extension, the principal enters into a listing agreement for the sale, or the principal enters into a contract to sell, blah blah blah, and principal agrees to notify the. So you can ask for, okay, it's kind of like a referral fee. So, okay, I'll cancel this, but if you sell it prior to the end of the listing, I still want a percentage of what you sell it for. So, so that's section 2. Section 3 says principal agrees to pay broker X amount of dollars for out-of-pocket expenses, costs incurred, and services rendered in marketing the property prior to the cancellation of listing. Now, when's the worst time to negotiate all of this? When you're breaking up, when it's the divorce. That's the worst time. That's why, if you're interested in being paid back for your time, well, not time, scratch that, because I had somebody say, I spent all this time, I need to be compensated. Hello, we work on commission. But if you want to be paid back for your pictures, for marketing materials, if you want to be, if it cancels, you want to recover some of this money that you spent. Say you agreed to stage it. A lot of agents stage, do the staging. And if you agree to cancel it, you want the money back for the staging. Negotiate that in the listing agreement, saying, should this cancel prior to the end of the listing period, principal will pay me X amount of dollars for out-of-pocket expenses, costs of insert. You've already negotiated that. You negotiated when everything was sunshine and happiness and everybody was on the same page. And then 3 weeks later, you hate each other. So, but look, you already negotiated it. So now it's part of the contract. So if you want to cancel it, you owe me this money. So, okay. And the most common that I see is 4, which is principal owes no compensation to broker. Meaning you're releasing them, you're letting them go. I like to get reasons, and most of the reasons are they're unrealistic, they're so difficult to deal with, well, yeah, and that's fine, because look, it's your business, it's your life. Sometimes life is too short to deal with these people, and it's best to get them out of your life and move on and say, have a nice day. I wish you luck. And see ya. And just get on with your life and be happy. So that's the most that I see is 4. But something has to be checked. I will get these to sign and I will reject them and say you have to check something about what happens to the commission. I need to know, because otherwise it's a worthless piece of paper. So have the seller sign it, then send it to me to sign electronically. They only sign things electronically. And then I will cancel the listing once it's fully executed. So do I have any questions about this cancellation of the listing? Because I get it wrong every day. Not hearing any. That is it, unless there is something else. And I'm not seeing anything. So I thank you. That's about 5 o'clock. So thanks for joining me. And I hope you learned something. And
Thank you,
I will
Rich.
see you.
Thanks, Rich.
Sure. I do have to say that I'm in Vegas. Next time I was supposed to do a class, so I'll only have one class, and it's not for fun. Well, maybe, but I'm going to Inman, so in Vegas. So there will be only one class next month, and that will be on the 23rd. So I'll see you all on the 23rd.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.